Okay.
It is time.
No. Well, it seems like I have an advertisement here. I think I'm streaming. Or are we streaming? Okay, it says I'm live. I think I'm waiting for an advertisement. There we go. Okay. We can hide that. Are we getting sound? We can hide that. Are we getting sound? All right. Hello. How are we doing tonight? Turn this off. We have a couple people in the room, I think. Can you all hear me? Someone in the... Okay. How are we doing tonight? Right on. So, good. Awesome. So, hopefully, we'll be a little more sound this week than we were last. All right. Hello, Juliet. So, what I'm figuring is we'll do a quick block up and go straight into doing a bracelet today, or a cuff, or something in that vein. Let's go to W, and we will pick our cylinder. Nice. It's so funny when you pick one of their primitives. All right, so let's go to W, we'll go to cylinder. And we're going to rearrange this to make sure it's on the right axis. I prefer to go XY in the front. Oh, did I just blow it? I did. Never mind. It was right. There you go. X in the front, going through to Z. We'll get a ring here, and then we'll... So we'll just have line turned off. So it's real important at the beginning here to get some geometry. I guess I'm like going right in. Oh, we're still early. So I'll say some hellos right now. Since it's early, I don't want to. I never could tell. The one thing when we start is getting your scale set right away, so you know. One, so you have a consistent Dynamesh, right? And then because the Dynamesh is based on the size of the object in the space, and often these things come in super small. Here, let's see how big this is. And as you can see, this is 1 millimeter, right? 10 clicks, 1 mil. Another really quick and easy way to figure it out is you go into 3D Print Hub, and you update your size ratio, and see it's 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, right? So before we really do anything else, let's just get this thing up into probably, I think it's in the 60 mil range, but let's just check. Yeah, like 50 mil. We'll start there. And let's drop the W. Y, center, and then double check. 16, so we have quite a bit more to go. 52, that's close enough for right now. Give it a little bit more because we're going to squish it this way a wee bit. And that looks like the relative right size. And now we come over here, let's go back to cylinder. Let's just make sure our size ratios are close again. All right. If you'll notice, it reset the cylinder because I left and I sort of accepted the shape, so it's going to reset that cylinder. But at this point, obviously, it's not a big deal. I want just a little bit of geometry going this way. We want to get a center line when we're doing this, because we're going to do this in quad symmetry. You want a center line or your symmetry won't behave correctly. All right, there we go. Update. Yeah, 53 is fine. Because we're going to move this around a lot, so we're at least in the right. Hello, how are we doing tonight? Plans? Plan? Yeah. Sorry, I just ordered new glasses, so I'm sort of I can't. Just and let's check our thickness here by going Y, and that's 4 mils, so that gives us a lot of meat. We're going to bring that down some, I'm sure. So, but once again, at this point, not too stressed about it. Y, W. So it's something I try to get through to my classes, is that at the end of the day, you want to keep your block up as quick as you can. Don't waste a lot of time in block up. Unless, of course, okay, let me rephrase that. Unless, of course, you have a very specific object that you're matching to or something like that, then yeah, spend as much time as you need to get it to. But I find that when I give my homework assignments to the class, often they spend a ton of time in the block up phase, and they get sort of, bogged down in that block up. And, the beauty is that we have this tool that is actually very quick. And now with the new tools, the block ups are super fast. So I just want to sort of reiterate how important it is not to get tied up this early in like preconceived notions, especially if you're just creating as opposed to having a design off of sketches and you're trying to get those sketches going. So I tend to not work off sketches. I like what my subconscious does better than sometimes what my conscious mind does. So I trust my subconscious. Now, if you notice, I'm in ZModeler. We have our rough thing. I just pop some center things out. I tend, when I'm blocking up, I'll tend to use the ZModeler and work in direct planes so everything stays in line at this point. And, we all know move brushes. I'll always go down and do infinite XYZ. And then that way, when I come in here and start moving things, it's moving everybody, right? And this is just a really quick way to get some block up going. And like I said, I'm just moving stuff around at this point. I know I'm going to want some over and under stuff. I have no idea what's going on tonight. So we're just going from nothing. So let's turn on Z as well. We'll make this quadular. We'll knock that down. Punch it. So sometimes you'll notice that when you try to do these, they go through. If you actually go slower sometimes, they won't punch. You have to give it time to recognize what geometry it's sticking to. And so now, let's see, we will go to move topological. And the new update turns dynamic on for everybody, which is fine. You just have to know it so you can turn it off if you... I use the dynamic every once in a while when I'm doing stone sizes and things like that. So I know that my melee or my mill grain or that kind of stuff stays to scale no matter where I move the model, as opposed to optically. We can go over that some later. And as you can see, I'm just kind of fiddling with form right now. I always like a lot of over and under dynamic. So at this point, I'm just finding a place that I can apply that. We'll just go here and back to ZModeler, and we'll bring this here, here, bring it there. And actually, let's bring that out just a little less. And then again, and then we'll bridge these two. Bridge holes seems to work better, so I just come in, or you have more options in bridge holes. So come in, pop two holes out, and then click on your edge here. Turn this down a little. Click on our edge. Hello. I always suck at pronouncing people's names. Tanoki. All right, so we have, yep, we'll go bridge. Two holes, and see how we have a lot more options for what we can do. We'll just use arcs at this point. Boom, go to that one, boom. And then as I go up and down, it gives us the mesh density. Left to right plays with the curve. So you can kind of just get a little in there. And I tend to want to keep our geometry roughly the same at this point. The goal is not to have a lot of geometry out here, because when we start dividing this up, when this has more geometry than this does, obviously it gets exponential, and I don't know where my detail is going to be at this point. So I try to keep everything rather even. So in, here, that's close enough for now. And then let's go key mesh again and just get some of these out here. All right, that's okay. Boop. And just pull it across there. So now we have something that's sort of crossing over. Let's do insert. And we'll just, like I said, we're just trying to keep geometry roughly in the right place. Go back to move topological. And just sort of, if you'll notice, this one I left at the base meshes circumference or internal. So we know that's roughly where the wrist still wants to be. And we'll pull these out. Kind of tuck this in for right now. All right, and we'll probably bridge those together at some point, just so we have another moment here. Here, let's go ahead and bridge this. Okay, so this, if we try to bridge here, it causes complications because there's no space between these. So if we want to bridge the center area, and you want it to go down as 1, okay, since these are pointing in different directions, you'll be able to get that. If it's square on square, these will join if you don't have a space there. And so often it's just easier to insert a loop here. And then it gives you your bridging. This can be a pain in the butt if you're not really thinking about why you're having issues with it, Cintiq is the best thing you can. This is an older Cintiq 24. I have a new Cintiq 21. I have a Wacom Mobile Studio Pro, and I'll tell you, the Mobile Studio Pro with the new pressure sensitivity and stuff is it's quite a difference. You can tell the difference, and I think they're about to come out with the Cintiq Pro, or the one that's the higher resolution. They've announced that they're coming out with a 31 or 32 inch, and then I think it's a 24. I think it's a 24. I can't remember what the other one was. The only one I had eyes on was the 30. So, without a question, the Cintiq is well worth the money. Especially if you've ever sculpted before, the quality of touch is just really impressive. I mean, I think I I saw my first Cintiq in the art. I'm trying to remember this. I think it was the art department for the Hulk, and I saw it and I went out and bought one. I didn't even have a computer that could use it. I was just like, okay, I need one of those. And I'll tell you what, you can't express the difference it actually makes. I'm dyslexic as well. I have like bad dyslexia, and yeah, there's just being able to, just touch the screen where I want to touch it. Like using mouses or tablets in general, I get a little disassociated, and it's sort of like Etch a Sketch. I go over here, and then it goes over there, and then So yeah, I tend to be a little shaky around things that I can't just reach out and touch. So for me, there's just no other option. But I would really honestly argue it's worth every penny to get a Cintiq. It's just, they're magnificent tools. And, let's face it, if you're used to, drawing or, using your like stylus or like using a brush or clay tools or like actual clay tools, there's just no comparison in the quality of work you get out of it. All right, so we're gonna bridge somewhere else here. This is too open up the middle, but here, let's do this. We will insert here. Nope, that was inset, wasn't it? Nope, insert. Okay. We'll get a line here, and let's bridge this. Oh, no, didn't lock. There we go. We got that, and yeah, let's try one here for right now. All right, so that gives us a little bit of over and under. Like I said, I don't know where we stand at the moment. Let's divide this up and look at it. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, we can start from there. Now, you can see lumpy, not exciting, not super interesting. I'm just trying to get some material down that I can then start sculpting with. We'll turn this off for now. Okay, the other thing I will almost always do is get everything back to the same polygroup at this point. And that way, when I do want to start using polygroups as defining tools, I don't have just erroneous, random. Yeah, no, mouse, you just can't get, well, you're really not using ZBrush if you're using a mouse, because a mouse is only on or off. You're not getting your pressure sensitivity, so you're not able to get, let's get this up, lower res. The beauty of having a Cintiq or any of the tablets, and you can get if you can't afford a Cintiq or something like that, still get a tablet, because the thing about the tablets, let's just, is that you have pressure sensitivity, so you can go light, heavy, light. You have the capacity to do pressure changes on your model, which if you're just using a mouse, here, let me see if I can grab my mouse. It's just on. There's no pressure. It's just 100% on. It doesn't have the same drag latency stuff, or the lazy mouse stuff, how it's dragging on the surface doesn't, it's not the same. So I think that if you're using a mouse, you're not using ZBrush to like 1/10 of its potential, And man, I had a guy in one of my classes who was using a mouse, and you see a couple people out there are like, oh, all I use is a mouse, and you're like, what in God's name? How are you doing that? The P2 makes it resets your default to dynamic, so I come in and turn that off. Yeah, it's amazing to see what people can create with a mouse. Honestly, I'm just like, holy cow, because I've had a Wacom or Cintiq for, ever. I mean, I never had ZBrush without a Cintiq, so I don't even know what it's like. Okay, if you'll notice, I went all the way up to 17 million. So this way I know I have a lot of geometry when I start doing my block up sculpt. But the other thing this allows me to do is I have, go to geometry, I have 8 subdivision levels. And having multiple subdivision levels really allows us to control how we deal with our mesh. I know a lot of the creature guys and stuff really don't want to work at high resolution yet. But, the problem with jewelry is that, one, we can't pretend the texture's there. It actually has to be there. And two, we're dealing, this is going to be like, 8 to 12 millimeters. And so our detail is initially tiny. And if you're blocking up really rough, you aren't imagining, well, as you're laying lines down and stuff, you're going to have to reimagine them at a higher resolution. And when the minutia of the detail isn't happening here, I think you're just basically redoing things over and over and over again. Now, the beauty of this is that, well, I actually go up and down between my resolution levels. So I will come down and actually, start my block up at lower resolution levels when I need to. And then I will hop up. Let's see, that's on dynamic. And so this way I can come in, start giving some distance here, and, I can do a lot of this here. And then when I start sculpting, I just hop up. Now, I just got the remote, the Wacom pen remote, or the hotkey remote. And it's really great because I can undo and redo, and I've set up my keys, but I'm not using it tonight because I'm so used to my keystrokes. I'm still learning exactly how to use or to get this into my muscle memory. But I'll tell you what, man, it's cool because you can change your brush size, you can undo, redo. I have like the Control Alt and Alt the combinations down here. So it's really actually a pretty impressive tool. It's hard to demo with it because then I'm always looking at it because once again my my capacity to retain is diminished in my old age, right? So yeah, we'll just come in. We're just gonna define a shape here. We'll give it a little striking plate. I tend to always put what I call striking plates on the bottoms of my things because, let's face it, people wear things and wear them hard. And, this isn't really flying super great with me, but let's just get some form in here and then we can make some decisions. So, get a nice curve. We'll smooth this out a little. And I think we might change where these are going. So let's do this. We'll pull this up. We'll pull this down. Whenever you're doing big pulls and such, always tap it with smooth, just so you are relaxing your mesh. Because it's really easy to start making destructive choices. And so, like moving, twisting, snake hook, these are all fairly destructive tools for your mesh, right? Because at this point, our main goal is to retain some sort of mesh management that allows us to continue to use this as long as possible. And so, right, and move topological. So let's grab this and pull this down. We might leave it up here. Let's pull this through. We'll change that a little. So now we have a more interesting transition there, right? Now, under normal circumstances, and I kind of forgot to do it here, is before I start doing my block up, I will retain that initial shape, right? So I'm like, okay, well, it's pretty much there, right? We're pretty close. But often what I'll do when I forget to keep my shape, when I'll almost always duplicate when I start making fairly dramatic changes. I have this one right here is the 24, and I have the Cintiq Mobile Studio Pro 16. Anything smaller than 16 drives me nuts, but I'll tell you, it's great. You know, the thing about, I've never used one of the other brands. What I do know is that Wacom holds the patents for all this stuff. And so when I talk to students who have used or who purchased the, like, I think Monoprice has one, and, you know, there are a couple of people who are making other tablets. It really comes down to the pressure sensitivity. And I'll tell you, the new versions of the Cintiq that have 8 times the pressure sensitivity that this has. So the subtlety in stroke is pretty dramatic. And, you know, like I said, talking to some of the students that I know have went with the cheaper options, inevitably wind up buying a Cintiq. Or at least that's been my experience up to this point. But having never personally used one of the others, I have no idea where they stand in the technology anymore. I just, you know, I would prefer to buy an old, used 21 or 24 inch Cintiq, because I guarantee you a lot of them are going to start hitting the market, because as soon as these new bigger Cintiq Pros hit the market, a lot of the professionals are going to upgrade. So you're going to see, like mine, this is a 24 so this is the older 24 inch. And, you know, as soon as I get my new one, I'll definitely put this one up for sale or give it to someone I know, because the styluses are different. So I can't use this as a second monitor. Because at work I had this, and then I had a 21 inch as my second monitor on an Ergotron arm. But they were the same stylus, so I didn't run into the stylus issues. Here, do I have a new stylus? Is this my new stylus? Yep, see, not compatible. So you can't use the new styluses with these. It's a different software or different hardware. But yeah, definitely, they haven't hit the market yet, but as soon as they do, I guarantee you're going to be able to find used Cintiqs much easier, because the difference in the new ones and the old ones are pretty dramatic. I was like, oh yeah, you know, it's more sensitive, but now having, you know, when I was in London, my companion or Mobile Studio Pro was what I was using, and you know, even just playing with this compared to playing with it's actually pretty dramatic, the difference in your stroke sensitivities. So yeah, you know, I sound like a shiv for Wacom, but you know, man, save up, buy a Wacom. Yeah, it's just, you can't really, you know, I sort of remember trying to use a mouse and modeling, and I mean, even for CAD stuff, once I could touch the screen, and that's where it was touching and going, you know, without a question, it made a huge difference in my workflow. And you can see how I can come down to these lower resolutions here and do my block up in this lower resolution place and take advantage of all my low resolution stuff. And then when I want to actually start sculpting, I hop up to my higher resolutions. And I'll show you why I find it's important to block up with the higher res, especially in jewelry. All right, so that's getting more interesting. We'll see. It'll change. It's a little cluttered here, but yeah, we'll get there. Come in anytime. Just puff it back up with inflate. And this is a pinchy area here, so at some point either I'm going to have to pull this out, pull it down and separate it some. Here, let's just go ahead and do that now. We'll pull it down this way and then allow it to separate a little. There we go. So now we're not getting that pinch there, and it gives us another little story to tell here, right? All right. And we'll kind of continue that. And let's get these facing up. Maybe it's a little fat down here. All right. I don't know where that's going. Don't know if I'm completely convinced with that decision. All right, so we have a form. Not the best, but that's okay. We will improve it as we go. I tend to like things that flow a little better. This is just getting a little fat for me down here. So let's pull everything up and around a little more. This gives this. All right. We'll sculpt on this a bit and see what we get. So let's go back up to our higher reses. Where are we? Let's not sculpt at 17 yet. We'll be at 4. I tend to like to start sculpting in my anywhere between 1, 5, and 4. Yes, X and Z symmetry is on. That way we can try to get something accomplished in this time frame. The nice thing about the patch, remember you used to have to hold shift down and click on dynamic, and sometimes it turned off and sometimes it didn't. Now it's pretty consistent. It's just a double click. So that's a nice thing that they did in the patch. Even though it does reset everything, all of your defaults on your tools are at dynamic now. So I haven't resaved my brushes with the other preset yet because I just upgraded the other day. So the main brush I use is clay tubes because it sort of functions as a layer brush, right? You know, I can do this and it's going to stay. It's not going to do what buildup does. Oh, hold on. See, dynamic. Where as I stroke over, it just keeps building and building and building, and that has its place. I don't use it a lot. Where I'll use buildup is kind of sometimes when you have thin edges, you can use clay buildup and it'll bring it out. It'll sort of fill in some. Make sure you have backface masking turned on for any of your brushes, because I mean, how many of us have done this? You know, oh look, it's awesome. Oh, now I have holes in the back of my model. So backface masking is super important. Can you do some neat patterns on stuff like pillars with multiple symmetry? Yeah, we can apply some patterny stuff. Yeah, so yeah, your symmetries are really important, especially in jewelry, since most of the time, most people are doing things that are symmetrical. Now, I tend to fight that theory. I mean, I like, even when I get something symmetrical, like I'll block it up symmetrical, I'll often go in and make it non-symmetrical somewhere, because that gives your brain instantly recognizes when something's non-symmetrical, and it tries to figure out what's going on. So yeah, X and Z means you're only sculpting 1/4. Now there, in jewelry, we have something called a bypass or bypass rings, and people come down and they're working with X and Z and they're trying to get the symmetry right. And well, that's interesting. Let's transform menu isn't there. Boop. And they think the mirror button's it, and they're trying to, and you're not getting a bypass. What you do is you choose the axis. I believe this will be a Y. You turn radial on, and you make it 2. Yeah. And so this way you can do bypass geometry pretty easily. And here, let's get this. And, so that's a bypass, right? Where it's kind of, bypassing each other. And so you can still do this with symmetry. You can only do it with one axis, but you can see how you can sculpt on it and sculpt bypass bypass geometry. And this is something that I find is a question my students ask a lot. Oh, how do we do that? So that way you can get a nice bypass. And that is using since I'm on the X axis in front, so Y is up and down. So we're looking down through the part. And yeah, radial count 2. But because we want this to be at least symmetrical while I'm thinking about it, we'll go turn radial off, go XZ, turn Y off, and now we're doing a quadular symmetry. Now I'm going to go ahead and start splitting this up into some polygroups, because I have this weave here, and so these things are going to get in my way when I want to sculpt here. So let us go to W, we'll go to Y, turn down Control, and it's here. Let's actually lower our subdivision. It'll be easier to control the mask. Lower. Yeah. And so we're going to try to get so that's pretty good actually. And now we'll come in, and I'm going to unmask that, so we have a split there, and then I will pick 2 and just sort of paint out this. Right, so we can get back to this later and just through a simple click switch where we're sculpting. And so one of the those are touching, that's not good. All right, let's get back out here. Let's move this down a little. Let's pull this off the surface just a little so we can get in there. Let me find this here. Mask. You can see you start to have some issues getting that. I just grab Move Topological, just grab it, move it out of the way, so I can get my masking in here. Right? Okay, so now, just make sure we don't have anything Oops. Sloppy hands. All right, so that's looking okay. Let's give this a little more room. Gives us a little more room. And now let's just make sure that this is sort of the two pieces. And we'll just do Control W. And let's get rid of the line. And you can see it will change the polygroup, right? And so now, like, I want to reposition this back where it was. We can just go doop, mask, boom. And now we're back in here. I can go back to my move elastic or move topological. No point in moving topological at this point because we have it masked off. But you can see how now, when I have things that are interweaving, it's much easier for me to come in and sort of futz with the parts without having to worry about them getting all over each other. Here, we're going to move this up some, right? And so now we can diddle-daddle and move around without having, without having to worry about, see how these are touching. Now I can come back in and tune this to where, we're not touching anything. Our spaces are clear, right? And you can see I'm in block up. I'm not stressed about form yet. And we'll look at this. Okay, let's get a wave here. Sort of some nice contrapposto. All right. That's pinching. Move it up. Okay, so now, we can smooth that out. And we don't have to worry about when we start sculpting. What is that? All right, so let's we have a little spot there. I'm not going to stress about it. All right, so we have rough block up. We have our polygroup sorted out to my weave, right? I can be in and or out. And this looks like a horribly clumpy shape. So now let's try to resolve some of that. So I'm just going to start down here. Like I said, I pretty much almost always use clay tubes. Let's go to a slightly higher resolution. And now why I like to sculpt in the 1 to 4 million poly, let's go higher res one more time, is as I'm blocking up or blocking out my form, I'm using clay tubes. And so what I'm doing, since clay tubes retains a nice edge, I can start making geography decisions here as I'm blocking things up. And I find that when you're going to printing, having nice sharp edges and doing things in layers, right, as opposed to using one of these tools, one of your cutting tools, or what I call drawing tools or line tools. I'm not coming in like this and saying, okay, well, I want a form here and here, and oh, I want a little swoop here. This is flat, and you're starting to conceive of your part flat. And so it's a sculpting program. So try to keep sculpting, and you're going to wind up with more effective parts, right? So instead of coming in with lines, I come in with clay tubes, and I just, oops, that's not clay tubes. And I just start fiddling about, and I do a lot of back and forth, right? Because once again, clay tubes acts sort of like a layer tool, so I don't have to be stressed about digging into my tool too dramatic, or my part too dramatically. And I just sort of start creating low relief detail, right? I'm like, okay. And you can see I just sort of remove that around. I'm sort of adding, and like, okay, what are we looking for? I don't know. And so I'm just looking for that nice accident of form or a shape that I'm seeing that I find appealing that's going to dictate the vocabulary of the part. You know, it can be something that becomes sort of mechanical, you know, or at this point, you know, I can start making it much more organic, keeping my edges soft, but I'm still working in layers, whether it's organic or, you know, sort of, I consider it organic or architectural, you know. And so I break up how I think about the pieces are always either organic or architectural. So I'm like, okay, I will almost always have an architectural element on the bottom of anything that is being worn on the wrist or the finger. I call them striking plates or strike plates because, you know, let's face it, we're active, everyone's out and about, and, you know, you start hitting this thing. Well, then, you know, you have all this like really cool super linear detail everywhere. Oh, you know, I've got all this super fine little stuff. And it only takes going to a bar once and striking that on a cement bar top, and now all of this is gone. One night, oh, your part looks like this. People don't like to lose things off their jewelry, right? You know, if they have detail there, you know, they bought it for that detail and they want it to stay there. So wherever you're going to have a lot of physicality in the part, you want to make sure that there's something that doesn't have a lot of detail, because now they can slam this and I can put all these little hash marks over here, right? And as long as it's hitting this, that detail will stay. So whenever you have really nice minutia in your design, make sure that you have a high point that is protecting that detail. You know, on a bracelet, once again, like I said, this was too low for me, this really fine thing, because what's going to happen is you're going to walk by and hit that on the counter, and now you've just collapsed all your fine details. So I'm leaving this here because I'm going to show you how I deal with stuff like this at a later point, because like I said, I haven't made a decision about that yet. I know it's going to be an issue, but I'm designing, right? So, okay. And you can start to see the difference between this vocabulary and that first one I did a little while ago, you know, that was more like paneling. And so, I don't know, let's just sculpt around here and see what's going on. I tend to work with this in that 5 to 12 range at this point. And that's what's nice about being at the higher res. I can start to lay subtle block up in here and I still have it, right? Because if this was at a lower resolution, I'm not getting, see these motion marks? I don't know how many of you actually have worked in clay. Good evening. Have worked in clay, but when you're sculpting in clay or foam, the rake tool is what you usually use first. You come in and you sort of stroke in your surface, and that allows you to see where the surface is lying a little bit more subtly than if you're just using a straight scooping tool. And the rake tool is good here. I tend to want slightly more subtle rakes when I'm blocking up, right? You know, here. So my constant moving is sort of doing the same thing that in clay a rake tool would do, and it's giving me like little direction lines, and it's showing me really how the surface is moving, right? And so if you'll notice, I'm sort of doing back and forth strokes at this point. I want to, once again, not be precious with my block up. I want to move material around. I want to see what's happening. So it's like, okay, how do I want to transition? Well, since this is a bracelet, I know that I want sort of a ridge here. So that's the side of the bracelet, right? That's where it's going to take the most wear and tear. So I want a high ridge that isn't going to have much detail right there. So I can do lots of detail over here. All right, so let's just put a ridge in. Okay, we've put a ridge in. And now I'm not going to worry about this stuff yet. Let's just define, like I said, I'm still hunting for a vocabulary here. So I know that we have a lot of interweaving, woovy shapes up here, but those can go architectural or organic. So, you know, I just find it easier to come down here on something that's simple, a simple form, a simple shape, and find something that is compelling, you know, find that moment that I like that I'm now going to start this piece on, you know. Okay, well, that's sort of floral. I don't know if I want to go floral. So here we're going to crispen these up. We're going to flatten them out. We're going to punch these in. Grab pinch. Now be careful with pinch at this point, because pinch is an incredibly destructive tool in the sense of it creates very unsculptable geometry. And if you notice, I haven't really distorted my mesh with pinch. I'm just using it to clean up some of the sloppiness I had, and then I'll go back over it and relax the mesh back down to where I want it. So pinch is a good tool, but a lot of people even here like, oh, well, I want this to be like this. Well, now you've just created a completely unsculptable edge, right? You know, because we come in and it's like, oh, well, now I have all this crappy pinch geometry. So it's way too early to use pinch as a pinching tool. I'm just using it to sort of keep that a little bit more square. And so we're going to look at this, make that a little bit more architectural. And all right, so now, okay, so since I'm going to keep that simple, I'm probably going to keep this simple. And then I'm going to come out with detail and have it sort of mimic some of the stuff that's going on top. So I at least have a consistent design vocabulary going on here. So, all right, so now I've decided I want architectural and organic, or swoops. We'll see if these actually turn into organics or, and so, okay. And this is really how I approach a lot of stuff. I mean, you know, a lot of times I will have a little bit more direction than this, but really I tend to find that I really enjoy some of the magic that randomness can create. Because if we're going into stuff and we think we know, you know, exactly how this should look, you often find, or you often lose some of those really nice moments, that the subtle moments that you really didn't have planned, you know, because if we go in with a big plan, we tend to be a lot more precious with the part. And I think that one of the big problems with, well, I say problems, but one of the issues that a lot of my students have, and newer and or younger people to the creative process and to ZBrush in general, is that they get precious about their work. You know, you found one thing you liked, and you know, you're like, oh, and you work on it, and you work on it, and you work on it, and that's cool. It'll give you like a nice portfolio piece or something like that. But if you spent 2 months and you've only worked on 2 pieces, you know, at the beginning, you're not really exploring all the things you can do. You know, I throw things away all the time. I will get, you know, 8,000 steps into a model and I'll trash it and just go back to one of my previous saves and just move on. And, you know, I might bring that back later. You know, I might look at it again and go, oh, you know, that's cool. But because I use my quick saves, hold on, let's go to Lightbox, quick saves. So we have a lot of quick saves here, but then I file my quick saves. So I literally have, different iterations of different parts at all kinds of times. And that way, because there are certain things that are working at some point and then aren't working and then are working and then aren't working, or isn't working for this, but it could work for that. So if it's not working, I ditch it and I move on. And that forward progression is real important to me. And like sort of how I work. And so I tend to I'd rather throw something that is a good part away and come back and rediscover it than get bogged down and have a bunch of preconceived notions about a piece and not find that moment that really makes something wonderful. And, I have a lot of design classes. I have years and years of this. So I think my subconscious has a lot of choices. So it works pretty good for me. But you really, the second you get precious about parts, you tend to overwork them. You tend to not be willing to throw something away that isn't good, and in turn, you lose the opportunity to find things that are really good. And, stuff like that. And here and you can see, okay, well, now I'm starting to, like as I'm doing this, I'm pulling into the model below. This is why we broke this up into our polygroups. So I'm just going to double tap that. And now, once again, since I'm just deciding on vocabularies, this is where this intersection happens. It's sort of the next step. I know this is problematic right here, so I'm not too stressed about that part yet. And we're coming up, and let's... and yeah, I make a lot of sound effects to myself. And by going back and forth over these things, sort of, I'm not creating these super smooth surfaces. And this is where a lot of people run into problems when they are working with the higher resolution models. They bring their smooth out and they're like, oh, well, I can't get it smooth. I can't get it smooth. Well, that's because you can't get it smooth. You put a bunch of lumps in here. Now, and this is where I like to keep my quad meshes and or Z-remesh at a low poly or Dynamesh at a low poly, and then subdivide up. So I constantly am working with my up and down of my my resolution steps. And so I'm not worried about retaining smooth surfaces. And if all you have is a 2 million poly Dynamesh, then yeah, when you smooth this, you can wind up with big lumpy surfaces. But, well, we have multiple resolutions. So we just go lower res, and we can smooth it out, step up, smooth it out, step up. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's so many steps. But, I mean, people are always asking me, how do I get my high detail surfaces and how come they retain their smoothness? It's because back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I will put layers on and take them off and put them on and take them off. I'd rather redo it than, thank you. I'd rather redo it and get it right than try to hold on to something. And that goes back to sort of being precious about your model, even in the midst of your sculpt. It's better to keep moving, and it's better to, I'm just going to show you just real quick. Where is it? Let's go back to the quick save menu. You can sort of see these repetitive forms. Well, these things have mill grain on them. They're just, I don't want to reopen the model because, we're here, but I have hundreds of dots on this thing, and I literally go through and re-inflate them by hand. And, I wind up with a better product because I'm willing to just take that extra time, that extra energy and make sure that everything's right. And that's why I don't mind having a model that's fairly detailed and then dynameshing it, just so I can retain mesh control. The main fight you will have creating jewelry objects is keeping your mesh management in a good, sane place, because all this is pretty flat. But when you start going, okay, well, I want this. Well, now you have to manage that, or thank you. Mesh management is the biggest struggle with jewelry, because once again, we can't use UVs. We're not using pictures on low res models. We need our geometry there. And so, it can get tricky. So, all right, that's not bad. I know the top's weird, but we started from here, so I don't want to hear anything out of you guys yet. All right, kind of liking it. It's a little plain at the moment, but that's okay. Everything doesn't have to be chaos, I guess. Yeah, let's get something interesting going on here. Yeah, that's a little better. Right. Okay, and now let's come back up here. So now we sort of has this shape. This is happening. So I know that whatever I'm doing here, this surface is going to go into whatever's happening there, right? So I'm not worried about this surface interaction yet. So now I've created this sort of place, this moment where this can come out of this, right? And remember earlier I said, the best way to have detail read is to make it layery. So you want to make sure that you have things coming under and over, not that it's a drawn in line. And so you can see I'm starting to have a scoop here, because this is going to make light. This is going to reflect light, in a completely different way than this nice big flat surface is. So you're going to get a lot of curving motion in your light reflection here. And then this is going to read as a nice big flat white reflection. And so we want to start playing our reflection. Remember, especially in jewelry, and in any object, but especially in jewelry, since you're dealing with high reflective surfaces, you're not just sculpting an object, you're sculpting the light reflection. And so everything you do has to consider, how is this part going to react to light? And the best way to create visual interest isn't just chatter, it's getting the light to travel in very interesting ways, I guess. That sounds like an obvious statement, but and you can see I don't really know what's going on here. That's a little lumpy as a shape. So let's start to pull that down and what's happening. Okay, so let's bring this up. Okay. And that's becoming a shape. So we will once again, I'm just trying to create a nice scoop surface here that'll play contrary to this surface here. Right, this is going to be a fairly flat, if not bowy surface. I might actually put a bow in it here, or make it convex. So as the light reflection works, here, let's get snake hook and make this small. And so the curved surface, right, is, ooh, that's big. This is reflecting this way. And then you have a nice big flat. And then the first thing you have is this light starts to reflect this way. So you're getting, a really nice contrast in where you're getting your light and dark. It's not just dynamic. We're not doing this on a flat surface. That no matter how many lines you put on that is going to read as a flat surface. So we want our reflection properties to carry the story we're telling. And so I'm going to go to a higher res here. All right, so we have a little bit more geometry in here. Oops. And I'm going to start, because you can see with the higher geometry, I can now be much more subtle when I'm blocking out my surfaces. So we might actually have something do a return in here. I'm not sure yet because I don't know what that's doing. I don't like where that's going right now, so I'm just not going to think about it. We'll come up here. We have this bump here. And you can see how I'm using the clay tubes. I'm just taking off and putting it back on, and sort of taking off and putting it back on. And I can, at this point, design some very minute, finesseful surface engagements here by figuring out, just where I want it. And you can tell I am not concerned about smooth surfaces right now. I'm trying to get the light map that this piece is creating, right? And yeah, well, so that's going back and down somehow, and this is actually coming up. So we're going to sort of give that a concave. And I have to turn this back on to decide what's happening during this intersection. But I want to keep these. You can see I'm starting to tune my curves here. So I know that I don't want any big lumps in there. And, like I said, a lot of this will come once I know what's going on here. And that's kind of big and fat, so let's make this wider. So that gives us a good, nice, soft curve on the underside here, so it's comfortable. And once again, the only tool I've used really so far is clay tubes, right? I mean, I'm not really doing a lot of brush changing at this point. Every once in a while I'll grab, like I said, if I'm trying to make a sharper edge, like if I really want, like for me at this point I don't need to, but if I really wanted to make sure that this was, let's say, 2 millimeters, I know that's blah, blah, blah. So, I can come in and really tune what's happening with this edge and pinch. And I'm still, just run smooth over it again, and that'll relax it a lot. But pinch is a dangerous tube to use this early. Hello. Oops. Yeah, this is the one thing that gets me in trouble every time. The fact that the masking tool and the stroke Dynamesh tool, this isn't a Dynamesh, so it's not a problem. But if this is a Dynamesh, I'm a swipey person. I'm like, I hit keys, and it's just manic behavior. And it gets me into so much trouble when I Dynamesh, because it's like, I have a 15 to 20 million poly Dynamesh, and things are going well. You have a good rhythm on your part, and then you hit that Dynamesh, and it's just like, and it dies. It's very, very sad. And it's something I do a lot. Like I said here, we're gonna give this a scoop, and that's gonna punch the fact that this is going under here. Right. Okay, that's not bad. Right. And now I think these are a little melodramatic, but if we're going to do melodrama, let's do it. Let's bring this out into something melodramatic. This move tool is way too high. And once again, I'm just kind of sort of remembering what's under there. You know, we can always, come on, what are you doing? You know, you can see that it's been pushed around, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I'm okay with that. I think, let's undo that again. I thought there was a hole there, so maybe we won't do that. Come on, back out. You can do it. I find that it's very important to talk to your ZBrush. It has emotions. It can be persnickety. So before I move to the next step, let's look and see what we have here. All right. So you can see that in my sculpting, I took that down. I moved it a little. I don't care. You know, that's fine right now. Like I said, I wasn't real stoked with how this is happening. So we are going to do something different with that in a minute. But now this allows me to, we'll do this, pick this up tool. And I want to work a little bit farther up into the other, you know, I need this intersection here right now. So I masked off my base part, and I'll come back in, and I'm going to mask off this much of this part, right? And now I'm going to hide part. So now I have more information on this intersection. And clay tubes. And I'll come in and start to play with it. It's like, okay. It was just on the outside. Having the problem, why I brought all this down was because this stuff was on the outside of the bracelet, right? And if you only have this low part being the part that touches the wrist, that becomes something that's, you know, this as opposed to this, you know, it's obviously much better to have more surface contact. You'll wind up with, yeah, it's rough. I talk to my computer a lot. That's why, you know, doing these where I get no audio feedback, it's totally normal. I do this all day no matter what. It's interesting that now people get to watch my insanity. So we're going to stay with this concept. We'll just take planar, boop, and just knock that down. Or let's do trim front. Just see. All right. So now we know. Yeah. All right. Clay tubes. Now the one thing, obviously, you'll notice is that really I'm using pretty much one tool at the moment. I start to use other tools when I go in and start finishing things. And I mean, if you look at my tool selection, all of these are just polishing tools. I use SK trim polish. I use the flatten brush. I use the H polish, the B polish. Sometimes trim front is really important to be able to align your surfaces. Planar flatten, and planar flatten line. These are all really important ways of anchoring your surfacing. Okay, because now here we go. See, this is one of the issues of working in higher resolution when you're blocking out. Oh, I've got this weird stuff going on here. What's going on? Yeah, you just have to remember that you're not stuck there. Come in, come back in. We have now that's that little area that was the, yeah, let's get that, yeah. Remember this had that weird little area there. Okay, so now that's fine. And we just go back, click this. Oh, no. Yeah. mask, turn it back up, turn it back on, come in, oh, mask, bring the other one in, mask off your surface that you want to continue using. We missed that little spot before, we're not going to miss it again. Doop. And then hide part. And now we continue to work on this intersection. So you notice that was a pretty big geometry shift there, and you just lower the res, and now you're going to see something else that's sort of important. And that is, as we come up in our higher res, it will retain the memory of what was there before. And this seems like a pain in the butt right now, but actually this is spectacularly wonderful for us. You just come up, smooth, higher res, it'll be there again, boop, smooth. And sometimes when this is very problematic or these are real tight, sometimes you have to go back down, lower res. See, still there, smooth, come back up. Boom, smooth. So it actually retains a lot of your surface. It has a strong surface memory. And now where this is a fantastic thing, we're going to go higher res because I'm going to do a little thing here just to show you why that's wonderful. All right, let's see, we still have these things. All right, so now we've smoothed it all down. Great. So when you're working and you, here, let's just, we like this, and now this is a pattern. And we've gotten this far, and we've put this wonderful pattern in. Let's make it a little stronger than that. And we spent all this time, and we have this pattern, and now we want to move it. And, you know, the problem is that, well, when you move it, you know, you distort your pattern. And like if you want to try to smooth it, right? Oh, there's that step right there. Or, you know, I don't want that lump right there. You know, what do? Oh, great, I've just destroyed it. Well, you can actually come all the way back down. And do a nice smooth, right? So we've got rid of that lump. And we're going to come here. And we're going to move this up a little. And so all these changes we're doing to a piece that had a lot of texture on it, right? But you notice it's not here. And so we smoothed our base mesh. We've moved it up. We've given it a hump, right? We moved it around here. Let's pull this out a little. You know, we're just doing some finesseful changes there. But the pattern's not done there, so we're not going to cry about it. And now we come up. And as you see, it retains most of that mesh information. And so that way, I mean, look, you know, you still have nice crisp edges, you know, the finesse between that crossover, but we've moved the mesh, we've twisted it around, you know, we smoothed the base hump out, right? It doesn't have that big galupa hump in it. And so this is why having multiple subdivisions is really important. It allows you to, and you know, let's say this is a snake or something like that. You can do a lot of dramatic changes to it and not lose your detail. And so that's why I'm a big advocate of having a lot of, as many as possible, subdivision levels. All right, so let us just continue with this here. So, yeah, whatever. And so I know that I want this proud because I'm going to put some detail down here. I don't know what. Well, you know, it's lumpy. Not stressing about lumpiness. We're gonna, let's do a transition here somehow. We sort of have these little scoot transitions, so let's keep it going. These are going to be out here. And so now that's a little thin. So that's just a better counterbalance of thickness there. Just filling it up some. All right, so now that's okay. I can't remember what's going on top of here again, so I'm not making important decisions, but we'll just get this going. The other thing I'm doing is contemplating sort of where and how I will use texture to create low spaces. So often in something like this, if I'm trying to get this to be bright, this is now back up under something. I have this form brush that I made a bump pattern to, and it's a spatter, and it allows me to come in, and that's too big. Make it tiny. Keep the intensity up, and turn lazy mouse off. Try size smaller. I'll make it see sub naturally, and then I'll come in and do something like this, and that becomes a interrupted surface, so it doesn't just reflect brightly. If you're doing silver or something that you can sulfur, this becomes a place that sulfur really bites into. It's a nice contrast where you have texture and smooth. So in some of these scoops, I'm also thinking about how I'm going to use texture. But I know it's sort of the same concept as this, where I know I want something high so I can have really fine detail low, right? And see, in doing this, when I pulled all that out, you see we created a problem here. These nice little lips are higher than this. So once again, the first time you go bonk onto a bar top, you've just crushed those down. So, you know, that's why the other thing it's really important to do is keep your model moving around. Always look at it from different directions, because, you know, we did this, we pinched this, we brought it in, and then by doing that, I created a problem design-wise, or not necessarily design-wise, but wearability-wise, or longevity-wise. So now, see, that's higher than those. That's all you had to do. It doesn't have to stay higher. You know, you can bring this down, and, you know, do something, you know, pseudo-melodramatic there. As long as there's something up here that's going to hit. So if we're doing texture, remember I said I don't know what I'm doing here, but I figure we're going to do a linear repeating or a texture down here. So this acts as that high point that's protecting your detail. This here acts as high point. So we have sort of that shape, and we can kind of come in, repeat it, get some directionality in the design. So we're pointing down. And that gives us this moment in here, right, where you can put really fine linear detail that'll hold up, because this is going to take the beating. You can, like I said, take the bump and do a texture. You can do a texture. You can do little flowers, whatever. This right here is going to take the beating for all of the detail you have behind it. So you want to constantly think about where you want surface detail to hold, because once again, these aren't computer objects. These are objects that we want to come out of. We want to come out of the computer with it, so they become, tangible assets. And so you just constantly have to think about, where am I going to do the fancy showpiece? Where am I going to flash? And then where am I going to protect that flash? Because, a lot of people contact me and they design these really wonderful, beautiful things, and they don't sell because the second you sell a piece, it gets squished after 2 nights out, and no one's going to buy a second piece from you when, it doesn't have the longevity of wear. So that point, I think that was a bad decision. We'll go back. Come on. I don't like the pointing down. We have all this directionality going up, so I don't think we should change that. Let's see, where were we? Okay. Right, so, and you can see sort of there's this little hitch right here. So this is where, design-wise, you start making decisions. Show part, and look at what we actually have. Right, it's like, okay. Well, I have these 2 little lips here, and I think I'm going to stick with those in the sense of I'm going to split this here. You see what I mean? And so this is going to become a bold, it's above the wrist, right? So it's not going to take beatings. So this is going to become sort of a bold transitionary shape. I can get this big, these could become thin, right? And so I'm going to kind of choreograph what that's doing, and then we'll just put a ridge here so I know that something's going on here. So now, when I'm thinking about this piece back here, this is going to split. So get rid of that part for a second. And I want a nice straight line here. This is an odd shape, so we're just going to tune this up a touch. We're going to move it around. And we're at 17 million. I'm going to lower this again just so I'm taking advantage of my processor speed and stuff. I don't want it. There's no need to beat it down when it doesn't need to get beat down, especially when you don't have a lot of processing power. Remember, you can always hide parts you're not working on and get much more or much higher workable resolution, if that makes sense. All right, so we're just gonna kind of, here, we're gonna get rid of that little part too that's in my way. I don't want to drag it around too much, so just get rid of it. The beautiful thing about ZBrush is it's digital, so you can get rid of stuff. And we forget that. I mean, I do it all the time. I'm like trying to work around something and I'm constantly dragging this. I'm like, and then it's like, well, I have hide. Just, hide it. Don't be silly. But we are all silly when you sit in front of a machine for, 18 hours and you just forget you can hide things. So, so I know that that's going to split. So we're going to turn that into that kind of detail. That's going to reinforce this curve. Not that anyone's ever seen these shapes in my work before. I do tend to have a vocabulary. So now that this is split, I can make this a bigger thing, right? I'm going to make that. All right. So that's looking okay. Now, remember how you used to be able to hold down Shift and it went straight? Well, now they have that tool in it. You can go here, hold down Shift, and you can drag. Right. The other tool that I use is Lazy Nezumi. I don't know if you all are familiar with this one, but it's a really good program, and like you can get, it has all these set guides. So like I can come here, and now it's locking on that z-axis, right? And then you can see that we're locking on the y-axis. And so in these, you can move around, right? You can move them to whatever you want. You hold shift, it locks on the 5-degree. These are completely programmable. They have all these different things. The thing that's really nice about this, guys, is you can actually draw circles on things. I know that everyone has a hard time drawing circles on things sometimes. And so you could come here, let's say that, we want this, hold down Control, and now I can turn this, Shift, lock it. I can make it an oval. And so now, I can do locked, or wondering why it's not answering. Am I not, did I miss a question? Is that what we're talking about? Well, you'll answer as soon as the lag catches up. So you can see that if you really want clean geometry, Lazy Nezumi provides like some really interesting tools. It also has a bunch of smoothing tools. So, sort of like your the lazy brushes. It has tools that are lazy brush E. It has it has like fisheye perspective. So, you can get the curve in, and then you can come in and curve, and then you can come in and curve. And so you're getting a directional change as well as an arc, So Lazy Nezumi Pro is a really good guideline program, just in case none of you have seen it. It's good stuff. But we'll turn it off right now and hide it. And so, I know that I want this to be, wrong button. I want this to be here. And we'll do that. Shoot. So in that case, I did draw a detail in, right? But I know that I want that to be there. So move. I want this to be a little bit more, slightly fatter form. So it'll be something interesting from the top, not just the side, right? And as we can see, I still don't like this down here, but still not worried about it. All right, so we're slowly creeping up on this thing. Since this now is interacting with it, we can come up here and I can see this form alone, right? I've hidden that stuff so I can see what's going on with this form. And this is where we decide, do we want it to be flowy and organic and flowery, or do you want it to become more mechanical? Let's choose flowery. And so instead of straighten this curve out, we'll punch it, right? Where if we were going to have gone, yeah, I do. I do make rings this way as well. Basically, I don't really find much difference in, a bracelet and a ring as far as the design process goes, Getting it printed. Well, you get the ring size right by Ringmaster. It's Joseph has it in the downloadable plugins, and you just slide here. This is your ring size. These are your thicknesses. You get, boop, and you get a base model that is to scale, and it's attuned to the ring size. All right. So And like if we had decided we wanted to make this mechanical instead of floral, instead of accenting that form, right, I'd come in and I would just bring it up, start to do plain stuff, right? Start to get things in flatter areas. Go back to SK trim, dynamic, boop, and you can then flatten that out, and then you can turn this into a flat surface. So you can see how really quickly you can go from organic to architectural with not much effort in the design process, right? Boom, compared to, punching the shape a little, coming in, getting that, sort of getting curves. And so now, right, we soften it up and we see where it's going. Okay, so now we have, right, since we decided on organic, I'll punch this out. This will become another floppy layer. Scoops. And we'll push this up. And actually, we're going to bring that down. And this will become a different thing. Right. So that way from the top we can turn this into a nice shape. And that's where I say keep looking at it from both directions, because this is what it's going to look like on top. You might have a great shape here, but it doesn't necessarily read here. And we'll sort of punch that. We sort of have this like hit shape repeating, right? So we'll put it up here, just so we're dealing with a similar design vocabulary. All right, not a bad shape. From the side, it's not so pretty, but once again, that's easily dealable with. I left myself a lot of room in that opening so we can play with the parts and kind of get them doing something interesting. All right. Okay, so that's pretty close for a base shape. And you can see I'm starting to get this to curve this way, right? I sort of want a pillow form here, because this is a scoop going this way, and I want these to read differently. You want a lot of visual play with your light surfaces. You want things going in very different directions, because that's going to allow the eye to travel along with those reflections. And that's really the trick, tuning your reflective surfaces. And so from the side, it got a little square. We'll just move this up. That didn't change this from the top. Okay. Okay, let's see what the whole piece looks like again. So we have this weird little thing going on right here. This is going to return, I think. I'm going to make this touch base back here. And that'll just become part of that shape. But I'm not going to Dynamesh yet. This is the 24. I was going to buy a 27, but I knew they were coming out with a 30. So I bought the 16-inch Mobile Studio Pro because I was traveling. And so Yeah, so I'm waiting for the 31 or it's 31, 32 inch to come out before I buy one of the new Cintiqs. And I was on the road a lot, so upgrading off I had a 21, one of the newer 21s, but upgrading this one, I was just like, I'll just wait until the big one comes out. All right, so yeah, okay, we're getting there. We're not going to win any awards with this yet, but you know, just start. These are a little too close, so we just want to pull that off that surface, show it back. And now we can come in. So now we're working with that second tier shape. And I think that we actually want this to return a little stronger. You know, it's crowding that space a little. So we'll bring it up here and push that negative space in. Which one is it? The surface. So we'll bring that back under and that'll deal with that. Yeah, there we go. And that way we're not crowding that negative space, but we get a better return to this form. So now that I know that that's going over, we're going to change our mind about this. And we're going to make this come in thin. And just give it a scoop, show our part. Yep. Yeah. Well, how will I retopologize? Well, no matter what, I will either Z-remesh or Dynamesh this at some point, especially if I have like these places I've decided, you know, I can mask this off. Hold on. And I can now start to incorporate this back into the actual design, right? And then no matter what, you have to Dynamesh this. And so now that I know that there's a point where I'm going to have to Dynamesh, right? And like, I'm still not happy with this group here. So I'm going to have to decide how to deal with it. And here, we're just going to, I'm not making a very conscientious decision here, but we'll show part and lower. And move topological. You know, so maybe this will actually be an over return to that point or something, right? Nope, stop. So we'll bring this up just a touch. Let's move that back down and out. So this is still sort of a crap design element. Here, let's bring it all the way in. So maybe all this returns here. And you can see I have all this crap geometry down here now. So no matter what, I'm going to have to re-Dynamesh at some point here. Now, I didn't drag all this out because I didn't have a sculpting vocabulary sorted out here yet. So what I will do, here, let's just get a little farther on and I'll show you how I'll retopologize. All right, so we know that's going to have to happen. Let's just come back up. High res. High res, high res. All right. And let me just get a little sculpting on this and then we'll retopologize and move on with that. Okay, so we can't do move topological at this. See, if you try to retopologize, or move topological at this level, it just chokes out. This is really a low geometry tool. And here we're just going to bring this out and up. That way you don't have anything digging into the wrist right there. You want things to return up and off of the body. And that, and since that's returning, we'll make this return to the front. So we'll pull this up. We'll mask this off. We'll get a fat snake hook and kind of drag. Nope, we want it to stay together. Drag it sort of down. Let's pinch it together. Move. And then drag it down. So now we have these two returns. We have the base of our geometry sorted out. We have a mangled mesh that we can't sculpt on anymore. You know, we've made some decisions that are here. We're like, okay, I don't know how those got so off symmetry, but that's okay. So let's lower that and get these guys back in here some. Smooth that out. Like, okay. Now, at this point, we want to make sure that none of these things are touching, so we'll just accent this a little. We can hit smooth to give us some airspace in there. Oh, I'm not on move topological, that's why. We'll go back to move topological. We'll give it a little more room than it needs. Right? And we'll just kind of get everybody into place. There's nothing touching that I don't want to be touching. Right, we'll bring these out. And here, let's make this sort of a countering shape. Good morning. I have a dual 24 core? No, I have a dual 18, multi-threading at 32, of 132 gigs of RAM. Here, look, it's huge. It's just, it was a, it's an Origin build. So it's the guys who did, it was the brain guy behind Alienware when they sold Alienware to Dell, went down to Florida and started making computers. And it's great. I mean, it's probably 5 years old now. It's an old beast now, but they've just started, since it's all server drives and stuff, or server board, you know, they don't go out as quick, so it's held up pretty well. I really, Puget Sound Computing makes some beautiful, beautiful computers. I think that's going to be my next buy. As soon as this body jewelry stuff starts selling, I'm going to get a new rig, because this poor guy is getting old. Yeah, okay. So there we go. This is all a little weird in here, but we'll worry about wearability in a minute. So we have two sort of returns. We'll make that decision later. Everybody's kind of where we want it. And now I have this place, and I have this place where we obviously now need to remesh. So once again, with this cuff, we don't have a lot of interior surface compared to exterior surface, so it's not such a big deal. And I wouldn't do it now anyway, because since we have these things that need to be joined, we have to Dynamesh. We can't Z-remesh. So we now have to ZBrush. Well, what do? We duplicate. Because this still has all our history, we can go back, we can change it, we can do, we're now doing a major change in the part, duplicate, and since you just never know what your Dynamesh is going to be, I usually just always start at 128 to see what it gives me. No. And that's way too much. So 128 is giving us 3 million polys. So we're going to go all the way down to 8. We're going to undo, go all the way down to 8. Dynamesh, no. And that gives us 70,000. That's pretty good, actually. So we're going to stick there. All right. And why we're going to stick there is because, why? Can anyone tell me? Cherry King, so do you work on a commission basis? How do you approach getting these things made after the 3D print? Well, there are a couple shops I deal with. I deal primarily with a private shop that we help set up, and also Casting House in Chicago. For furniture, there's for furniture and the bigger stuff in bronzes, there's Metal Physics. And they do a fantastic job. They did the table for me and that stuff. So, yeah, Casting House is primarily who I go through for the jewelry if I'm not doing it the private shop. I would say if you're actually doing jewelry, go to, oops, that's not what we wanted. Actually go to a jewelry facility. You know, Shapeways and stuff is a great way to discover in an affordable way how to deal with printing, how to deal with your pieces, seeing what they are. But Shapeways is not a jewelry facility. You know, I mean, they do it, and sometimes they do a good job, you know, but that's really not what they're set up to do. They don't have professional finishers. They don't have, you know, I mean, jewelry is different than small objects. There's a certain level of finesse to the finishing that a lot of just the rapid prototyping places don't get. Okay, so we remeshed. Right? Woohoo! So we come back here and we go back up in our higher resolution, higher res, higher res, higher res, higher res. So now this model has all of our sculpted detail, right? And now we come back to this. Let's divide this a couple more times because this isn't going to do us any good at this res. So 1 million should be okay for your first projection. Project all. And this is, once again, a multi-step process. It's not like there's just the one button fix all. You know, you do have to go back and forth and back and forth, at least to get good, clean shapes and still have the capacity to have your control over your mesh. And, you know, you can see that this didn't project, you know, because this was loose. I'm just going to smooth it out because who cares? There's nothing there to worry about. You know, these are a little reachy. Once again, nothing too worried about because we really didn't have a lot of detail on the mesh. So it's not a big deal. We didn't close up anything. That's all we're looking for, that we didn't wind up with weird, because Dynamesh can jump, you know what I mean? It can close things. So here, everybody looks like they're roughly still there, right? So, all right, so we're here. There's nothing in particular that I need to keep as far as detail goes, so I'm not super stressed about anything right now. But let's look at our polygroups. They've kind of gotten weird, so we're going to have to re-polygroup this. And I'm going to inflate this little area here. I'm going to inflate this little area. I'm just coming back in and doing a little mesh maintenance, right? I'm going to go ahead and inflate that hole. There's no reason for it to be there, and it's just going to be a casting nightmare. And once again, I'm going to come up into here and inflate some of this a bit. I had a hole there, but there's no point for it right now. All right, let's just give this a little bit more meat. And then we're going to redynamesh it back down. Divide it up, divide it up, divide it up. And I still have most of my directional or my scoop and plane information. But see what happened? That jumped. So when I inflated those, that got within the threshold of what it considers a surface. So we have to come back, divide. No, not divide, sorry. Dynamesh. All right, nothing closed up. And now we just divide this back up. You can see there's really nothing here that I'm super stoked about keeping. I mean, if I like this stuff enough, no, come on. You know, I can come in here and block that off. This doesn't need to be projected. There's nothing there to project. All right, and now we can. Did I do that to the wrong mesh? Sure enough. All right, so we can come in here, grab this, flip it, project. And then some of that's a little bit more of that subtlety we can keep there. Here. Oh, if I'm doing freelance work, I will give everyone one reiteration and then I start charging for, I'm at the point in my life where I refuse to get tied up in, move it to the left, no, move it to the right, no, move it. How about a buffalo? I mean, really, that's how random people can get. So it's just like, so I tend to be kind of a jerk about iterations where when I make my contract with someone, I'm like, look, I'll give you one round of changes. If I think it's rational, I might tune it a little after that. But if you change it after that first round of changes, I start billing you for it. I'm not here to be your hands, you know. For the most part, when people come to me for designs, they're coming for my designs, right? As opposed to me doing your designs. So people are a little less persnickety with a lot of the stuff I do because they're buying my vocabulary. I mean, I do work for other people that isn't necessarily my vocabulary, but I've been doing it long enough. I'm pretty quick at being able to figure out what people want. But there's some people who just like to change things. And that's annoying, and I refuse to get caught up in that. It's not worth it to me to, it's just not worth it to me to get caught up in people's psychoses. And that's really, unfortunately, that's really what's happening a lot of the time with that. Yeah, you have to bust them on change orders, or there are people. I always call it art director syndrome. You know, there are people who only feel like they're participating if they're making changes, and right. This piece needs a buffalo. You're right. Okay, pardon me. I was being a little moody. Right. There are a lot of people who. And I think a lot of the modern jewelry companies are saying, oh, be part of the process. Come in, sit down and we'll design with you. I don't really do that. I'm not really interested in doing that. I mean, this is going to sound horrible, but I do this for a living and chances are you don't. And so when you're like, oh, well, let's try flowers. It's like, well, that's on the inside of the ring and it's going to turn your hand into mincemeat. Or, oh, let's put baby hands, 2 heads, a tree, and an alligator tail on it. It'll look great. Yeah, no, I'm just not really there for you for that one. I'm that guy. I'm like, yeah, you might need to go deal with someone else on that. So, it's tricky. It's how you want to work, really, at the end of the day. this sounds horrible, but I just can't be bothered with that much drama. You know, the people who want to participate and want to help, and be careful for engineers. I love you guys. Engineers are wonderful, but oh man, they're a nightmare to work with most of the time. It's like, no, you can't do that. No, no, it's a struggle. And you know, smart people think they're smart. You know, yeah, iterating's a nightmare. You just have to say, look, you know, once again, luckily, like I said, most of the time, if you're buying my designs, you're buying my designs, so I don't really run into too much of that. I told you the size issue. How do you size rings? You use Ringmaster. It's a plugin. You can download it for free. I think it's even on the ZBrush. It's Joseph Durst's plugin, so it's free, and I'm pretty sure it's just in the Pixelogic download. We worked on it for quite a while. It's a good plugin. Is that the size issue you're talking about? I mean, I'm pretty sure it's right here. Hold on. Oops, wrong one. Excuse me. Schloop. Software. Is it community? Where's plugins? It's been so long since am I just really missing things? See, this shows how bad I am. It's been so long since I've looked on the website, I don't know where anything is. Where are all the plugins? All right, you're a big boy. You can find plugins. Because I have no clue where it is. It's just in the you know, where you can download the plugin stuff. Sorry, I'm a ding dong. I have no clue where it is. It's there, and it's just called Ringmaster. All right. I'm sorry, showing my I got it from Joseph. I know it's in there somewhere. I've seen it. Just where is the big issue? Sorry. And so now, just coming in, and you can see I'm not too stressed about any of this. This is just so you can move some material around. All right. Control W. That should give us different. Yeah. Oh, no, that's weird. Why did that stay green? Let's get rid of that. Mask. Bring it all back on. Flip my mask. Control W. There we go. Wow, that's funny. Blurry masks. But it's fine. So now we can pop this out, come back in, look at this, see what we're doing. Right? All right. So let's get up to our higher reses. Can I give you a ballpark number for... So basically, I do I have a $17 day or $1,700 day rate, and if I work an hour or 23 hours, that's my day rate. And if there's someone who like can't afford that or something, like, I do talk to people. I will work with people around certain things, but for the most part, that's my day rate. And then if I'm designing something for a company that is mass producing the part where my name's not going on it, I'm just generating a piece that you are claiming that is yours, and you're going to make thousands of them, I charge anywhere between 10 and 20 times suggested retail. Because if you can't, if you're going to sell 1,000 of something and you don't feel that the price of 20 of those sales is worth the design work for the rest of the thousands, you can find someone who cares more about making you rich. So, yeah, in a lot of ways, a lot of jewelers, the thing is that we've come to a point in the world where on, GrabCAD or CAD this or whatever CAD or TurboCAD or CADDY-CAD, people are selling models for 10, 15 bucks. And, I've been sculpting for 40 years, and, I've been doing jewelry for 11, and, I've been doing what I do for a long time, and my models are very tight. They print. You don't have troubles with them. What you see is what you get. They're producible. And so I don't need to make other people rich anymore. That's the other problem is I am not a lawyer. So I've gotten into a few contracts where there are certain companies that are making quite a bit of money off my designs that I'm not getting a penny off of. Because, I was being nice. I was being friendly. I believe that person wasn't a douche. Lots of things like that. So now I'm kind of a prick about it. And, if you don't want to pay my rate, you don't have to. There are people who do. And the teaching thing is becoming more and more a bigger part of my income loop, surprisingly. I mean, I left grad school because I was like, well, the only reason to go to grad school is if I'm going to teach, and God only knows I'm never going to teach. Well, okay, fine. I'm teaching. And we're kind of tuning that into a bigger part of my, like how I'm making money. This summer, I'm trying to make a class that's a certification class. So you can take the test online and get certified. ZBrush is supporting me on that one. And, that way I can certify people, and that way employers know that X, Y, and Z. It's just tricky. I'm trying to figure out how to, we have the process to make the testing, but it's not like a ZBrush certification because I'm not teaching you to use UV maps and things like that. So, it's really targeted towards jewelry design, and I just have to decide what are the things that I need you to do. I have a class for I think it's another 2 weeks, and then I'm free for a little bit. I have some freelance work I have to do, but I'm really going to sit down and try to focus on developing that cert class. And so the whole teaching thing has become an interesting part of my job. I would never have. Yeah, I can't even tell you. I don't know. It was something I never, ever, ever considered doing. And it's been absolutely fascinating, doing things like this and teaching, and, when I have to sit down and explain what I do as opposed to just sit around and do it. Because a lot of my habits I've developed, I've developed these habits over years and years and years and years and years. And there were, I made decisions for reasons, and, my memory is an absolute disaster. So I drown. My brain don't work so good no more. And so a lot of why I made some of these decisions I don't necessarily remember. And teaching, people ask you questions and you're like, oh, well, why is that? Or, why does that work? Or why doesn't that work? And now I have to, I have to know why I'm doing things a lot more now that I'm trying to convey the information on why you should do things. And it's funny because, having been printing and really doing this for small object work for so long now, there are just some real simple things to remember that really make your work thousands of times better. And that's, once again, sort of like this, just working and thinking about little layers as opposed to coming in with your tool and going, okay, well, I want to do this and because you're not thinking about your part dimensionally, you're thinking about it as a two-dimensional object at this point. And there are times I'll come back in and do some of this because I want a two-dimensional graphic. Any advice on negotiating? Be willing to turn a job down. That's really the big thing. If you are desperate or if you really need that job, unfortunately, you have no negotiating power. That's the problem. And I turned down quite a bit of work because it's not worth my time. I'd rather work 3 days a month and get my money than work 3 weeks and get the same money. It's easier to turn down the job. Now, luckily, I'm known for what I do, so I have some. Where does the Form 2 back there sit on the pipeline? Would you design something? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Well, I think everybody has to. If you're designing product, and that's toys, miniatures, jewelry, whatever, I think, you have to have a printer because you have to be able to just go print. And I wish I could. Where's the pile? Here, hold on. There's a time lag. You see how we have all the prints on the board there? And then over there's just a pile of prints. You have to print something. It may look fabulous in the machine, but until you've printed it and held it, you're like, oh, that's just too small. Oh, that's too big. Oh, that's too thin. Oh, that's too fat. Because this right here is not real. No matter how you want it to be, this is not real. The lighting effects on this are not real. This is not what the object looks like in the real world. It's not real. And so, having something in your hand is a big deal. It's a really big deal. So I would say, and the nice thing about the Form 2 is that the Solus does really beautiful tiny detail that's in it's B9 resins and altered B9 resins, so they cast and they burn out well. But it's very small, and I do glasses and bracelets, and we have a Solus. It makes beautiful parts. The Form 2 is just better prototyping for me because I can print it in plastic. I can hold it, twist it, bend it, play with it. And honestly, if the print's good, I can just take a silicone mold off of that, because at the end of the day, casting resins versus casting injected wax, you get none of the thermal expansion issues. You get none of the burnout issues with waxes that were designed for casting. So normally, even if we're doing it off of the SolidScape, we are making a mold off the part and then doing injection wax off of it. So really, I'm not casting off of any of these printers except for the SolidScape for the most part. If that helped. Yeah. Negotiating's such a bugger, man. Do you need to know much about metallurgy for what you do? The more you know, the better off you are talking to your caster. But to be deadly honest, unless you are a jeweler, don't try to be a jeweler. Be a designer. Get good at creating objects in ZBrush, design them, and then hand it off to professionals. Because, it's just like, you may, even a Formula One driver doesn't tune his engine. He doesn't even change his tires. You know what I mean? It's like jewelry's specialized, and there are people who spend their entire lives getting good at these jobs, and the day you think you're good at it, I mean, because you won't hear me say I'm a jeweler. I'm a jewelry designer. I'm a sculptor who creates jewelry objects, because there are people who spend the entirety of their lives getting good at that jewelry process. And you know what? Unless you really want to be a jeweler, you don't want to be a jeweler. You want to be a designer, you know? Oh, sure. But man, I'll tell you, if the client sucks, you got to pay, and you got to pay a lot. I mean, there's sometimes you just can't turn down the money, so you deal with it. But oh man, yeah, it's tricky. The other thing is, even if you get a whiff of weirdness from the client, I tend to want 50% up front, and how I bill, that 50% will cover my costs. I'll be peeved about it, but it will cover my costs. So no matter what, even if they try to screw me around at the end, I made my money, in quotes, And so 50% up front, 25 on approval, and then 25 at the end, delivery of the model. Yeah, that's how I try to handle things. And for the most part, I get good clientele, because at least I have a okay reputation for what I do, and people are approaching me for the most part. I'm not out there really hunting for jobs. And so I'm not hustling for work. So luckily, 99% of the time, you're approaching me. So me being a little more demanding about how I'm dealt with, or persnickety, I have a reputation for being kind of persnickety. So, if people are saying, he's good, he could be, persnickety about things. So, I'm fortunate enough to have like a reputation and a body of work behind me that people are approaching me. So I can be a little bit harder on a client, I've had clients like that. Oh yeah, no. When you're handling over your designs to jewelers, do you have them sign NDA? Well, it depends. Like usually, I'm the one signing an NDA if that's the case. I mean, I don't give anyone anything they can use. I take screenshots. I don't do renderings. No one gets models until they're paid for. Oh, let me look at the model. Well, we can have Skype, and you can rotate your model, or I can embed. I can't remember what the extension is called. It used to be you could get an STL in it, but they changed it, where you can embed a 3D object into a PDF, and they can rotate it. They could take it, but it's unusable. There's nothing they can do with it. So, no, I will never send someone a model until it's paid for. That's just not happening. It's like, oh, here, let me eat this meal, and then, here, do all your legal services for me, and then I'll think about paying you. Or no, that's not how the world works. The real world works anyway. Anyone who gets crabby with me, it's just like, you find out what they do, and it's like, well, would you deal with that kind of request? It's like, unfortunately, artists are expected to deal with the most non-professional expectations from people, and you're like, well, would your car mechanic work that way? Would you work that way? Yeah, 3D. Yeah. And so I think that, sticking to your guns, and just, if anyone gets weird about it, oh, well, I need to see it, I need to do it, you just throw it back in their face. It's just like, you would not work this way. You would not provide the services that you do for a living to me in this way. So why in God's name should I be expected to, babysit your whims when, I'm paying my rent with this stuff? This isn't a joke. It's not a hobby. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that it is a hobby and they charge $50 for things. And, if that's who they want to go to, fine. And that's what I mean by being willing to turn down a job, because a lot of times people are like, oh, well, my cousin Sally's third cousin's nephew makes models. It's like, well, why are you talking to me? It sounds like your third cousin's nephew, could do the job for you. Yeah, it just, you get frustrated, so you just become a little bit of a turd sometimes. Okay, that's projection. I get frustrated. Any tips for clients who want to hire you? Do's and don'ts? Just be honest, and don't, remember that this is a mutual thing. Let us make money together. I am not here to make you rich. I am not the help. I'm not, if you had the creative impetus to do this, then you don't need my creativity. For the most part, people aren't hiring me to do. Okay, well, some people are. Most people aren't hiring me to do their work. You're hiring me to do my work, if that makes any sense. And so, you're trying to make money off of my past, my design aesthetic, my skill set. And it's taken a long, long time to get here. I'm not 18. It's not, this isn't new. I've been doing this for a long time. And so just approach me as, an equal. It's like, look, I want to do this. Well, cool. Let's make money doing something. And I understand you're the money up front, but you also have to understand the artist is what you're selling, Of course. Thank you. Have a good one, Soulcatch. And I think really that's how you should approach anyone hiring you. It's like anyone who goes, oh, but I can get, my average designer gets paid $8 an hour. Well, if your $8 an hour designer you're happy with, why are you talking to me? If that $8 an hour designer isn't doing what you want them to do, why would you expect me to work at a price that, people are unreasonable. I think, unfortunately, I think the job market has been in such a crap way. People are willing to, people are desperate. So people are willing to do anything to stay afloat, which, I get. I'm not saying that's wrong. I think that's, of course. But employers have been a little too spoiled, a little too long. And, now they don't understand why they have to pay more than they did, for the last 10 years. And it's like, well, dude, the world changes around you. What's the airline that actually shut down instead of paying pilots, legitimate rates? It's not like there aren't pilots to be hired. They just didn't feel that they needed to pay the full rate. So they're closing their business for a while. Now, as an airline, that's insane. It's like, what are you thinking about? I just think that people who hire have had it too good for the last 10 years, where, the economy has been such a bugger coming back that, people are willing to work because they're desperate and they don't want to lose their house and they don't want to. And, I think that's the mindset that a lot of people who do have the money to hire people think, and so we have to struggle with that, I think, a lot right now. And unfortunately, our society doesn't, the middlemen are more important than the creators in some way. And it's a real frustrating fight I have with people quite a bit. It's like, well, if your sales manager can do it, then let them do it. You don't have anything to sell if the stuff isn't made. So why does creative get crapped on? And, like I said, it's this never-ending fight for me. And don't get me wrong, I fight with it all the time. It's not like it's super easy, but like I said, I'm a little lucky because I have at least some reputation for what I do. Not always a good one, but I have a reputation. All right. And you can see now it's just mesh management, and just figuring out sculpting. Now, with the bracelet, like I said earlier, this isn't so much of an issue because most of our geometry right now is on the outside, and these are still pretty big shapes. You know, I'm not really getting into minute detail. And I don't even know how long we've been going. Did someone... We're okay, right? Yeah, it's all good. Sorry, had to breathe. Yeah, well, that's the trick. It's like, luckily, you know, I've designed a few lines of jewelry that are making money. And so if someone approaches me, I can go, well, look, you know what? I mean, this isn't hypothetical. This is, look, these people have made over $1 million on X, or these people are selling X amount of Y, you know. So through having objects that have value, you know, I have a concept of what my worth is. The 1700 is based on 170 an hour for 10-hour days. And let me tell you, I do far longer than 10-hour days. So at the end of the day, anyone who's paying me is getting their money's worth. And, you know, 170 an hour is nothing. In, you know, the world today, you know, when a nanny, you know, is getting $40 an hour, or, you know, a dog walker is getting, you know, $53 an hour. It's like, well, okay. And I'm not saying nannies are not important, don't get me wrong, that's not where I'm going with that. But, you know, it's like, there aren't a whole lot of people in the world that do what I do the way I do it. And so, you know, you're buying what I do. And you're buying, you know, 40 years of sculpting. You're buying, what, 11 years of ZBrush. You know, I mean, you're not just buying the object, you're buying the fact that I can do it quickly. And that's where the problem with the better you get, the faster you get, and in turn, the less time it takes you to do objects. And so if you're doing hourly rates, you're actually getting punished for being good. And so that's why I don't do hourly work. I can't. Most people aren't willing to go, okay, well, I'll work for $250 an hour. You know, if I'm doing 8-hour days, yeah, $200 an hour, $250 an hour, yeah, because I don't want to work by the hour, because then I have to pay attention, you know, just the pain and annoyance that comes with having to think about hourly rates for me. I'm a goofus, man. I'm a low functioning human in a lot of ways. You know, I'm OCD. I sit around, I work all day. I drown. My memory isn't great. So if I had to sit around and deal with my accounting all the time, I'd lose my mind. You know, it's like, until I get a business partner, I can't even but I mean, but that is someone who's willing to do the business side of it. Then, you know, it's like I wouldn't be teaching if it wasn't for Ryan, because, you know, he does everything. And then they just send me a link and I show up to class. And if I had to actually manage calendars and like make sure people paid, blah, 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 I'm just not built for that kind of business, unfortunately. So how you find your value in a market is, you know, have objects that have sold. You know, I sell, you know, $600 skull rings. They sell. So, you know, that put a value on some of this stuff. And then I started doing other things, and those things sold, and that put a value on it. And oh, well, that didn't sell. So in that market, I'm not really, So a lot of it is just time, spending time selling and designing objects. Where do they sell? Do they sell? Do they not sell? I mean, do they produce well? How many different iterations do you have to do a part for it to be successfully printed and grown, or printed and cast? It's a amalgamation of a ton of things. So, I mean, how long have you been doing jewelry? I know there's a time lag, so it's not always. And like if you're not producing your own jewelry, and you have to depend on someone else to do it. I was really lucky that Green Lake Jewelry hired me. I was doing all the stuff in my basement and all my finishing, and I was getting stuff cast at Casting House, and then I'd come home and I'd finish it. And I was just doing stuff and I don't know anything about the jewelry industry at that point. I was just making stuff. And then Jim Tuttle at Green Lake hired me, and it was really, really great because then I was working around professionals, and I saw what, when I wanted to design something, I sat and talked to my caster. I sat and talked to the stone setter. So I had access to, some really wonderful professionals who I saw work. I could perceive their value, and, a lot of my students are always like, oh, I want to do everything. And it's just like, unless you're rich and have a lot of time, or you're a jeweler to begin, it's just, jewelry is a specialized industry, and people specialize at each little part. And, if you want to be a hobbyist and do it yourself and then slowly learn how to do all these things well, then great, that's cool. But I mean, if you're going to give it a shot and try to pay your rent with it, let me tell you, you don't want to learn all that. I mean, find the best way is like to take some jewelry classes, and then you'll, just some community jewelry classes, and then you'll be introduced to places that are producing stuff. Go into casting facilities and talk to them and say, hey, look, I'm experimenting with X, Y. If Jason at Casting House didn't see my work and said, oh, yeah, we'll cast that, because I was told by probably 10 different casting facilities that my work was uncastable. And then a friend of mine was like, oh, you should go to Chicago and talk to Casting House. And Jason at Casting House was super excited, super helpful. I mean, I would not be a jeweler if it wasn't for them going, yeah, we'll take a chance. We'll make these pieces. And then, it's interesting. Through these relationships with the professionals are where you're going to get, the real information and the real skill sets, or the people with the real skill sets to, make a business happen. But yeah, if you're not a jeweler, if you're just a ZBrush, and I'm not saying just a ZBrush person, but, if all you're doing is designing, making relationships with real jewelers is going to make your life a lot easier, because you're going to learn this is a crappy design. Oh, that's special. All right, hold on. Yeah, I mean, do you have multiple lifetimes? Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how do you spot a cocky client in the first place? They'll be like, oh, well, I could do this, but would you do it? I don't really have time to finish this. Would you mind working on it? Yeah, it's just, it's, them. You don't need me to tell you how to spot them. You know them. they're horrible people doing horrible things. You know, yeah, who knows? You can smell it on them. You know, you could smell it coming. It's just like there are people who just, you know, anyone who thinks that they're doing you a favor. Oh, it's a Ma Dirty Blue. Gosh, here we go. He's a friend of mine. I can't even remember his name. It's MAH, the Ma Tools. It's the Ma Dirty Blue. I really do think it's the best, and this is something to consider, guys, is that when you, okay, here, since I have some stuff sculpted, I'm going to go ahead, just because I'm taking a long time on something that's not great. I'm just going to dynamite this at a slightly higher res. Let's see if we can salvage this. The whole talking and sculpting thing has been a little rough on me tonight, huh? What was the... Thank you. This was not as successful as we would have liked. But, you know, this is a prime example. It just wasn't doing anything I wanted it to, so we'll just change it. And, you know, futz with it until we get something good. Well, yeah, clients are tricky, man. It's, you know, how do you deal with them? Yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily good at it. Yeah, I don't know. I can be a difficult person sometimes, or so I've been told. I don't think so. I think I'm very rational. But there might be different opinions of that one out there. You know, it just, the problem is this, man, is that, you know, we need to eat. You know, people need to pay their bills, so they're willing to do things. You know, they're willing to do things that are not necessarily in their interest or the best for them, so, you know, they can work. And man, after Hollywood and leaving Hollywood and, you know, really just, my whole goal in life at this point is just to like have no stress in my life. And I make decisions based on that. You know, it's like, is the money I'm making going to be worth the stress that it's going to take me to get this done? And yeah, you know, it's funny when you start judging your work that way, you get a better quality. Oh yeah, without a doubt. Sculpt your way through things. It's, you know, it's easy to get caught up in this and think about that. You know, yeah, just, you know, it's like, okay, that was interesting, but it was just not going anywhere. So we're just going to blend some things together, take some things apart, and see where it goes. This got weird. It's always nice when you go into things with an idea. I'm like, oh, here we're gonna do a thing. Ta-da! But if you've really, you know, you notice I'm really not using a lot of tools here. Let me see. Let. Where are you? Trying to find. Yeah, that's William Henry Bede. Let's see. All right, let's just look at this piece. No, we don't need to save the changes on that. That was a silly part. I want to actually talk about some of the finishing tools. I just don't think we're far enough along with that to make it a issue at this point. Well, the hook actually is a pretty good example too here. Here, actually, let's go here, because this actually went into production, and there's, you'll hear me talk a lot about what printers can hold detail. Sorry, people are yelling at me. All right, so this was a hook for Guy Harvey, and so you can see how this is decimated. Okay, do we have the hook not decimated? Okay, that's not decimated. Now, you can see how we started to do a lot of linear detail here. And let's get in here. So you can even see here where when I'm talking about trying to do things in layers as opposed to just drawing detail on. And you can see how it's not just, these waves don't work because we came in and drew a line, right? And I was using the form ZBrush. You kick it up to 100, and it's very good for coming in. This only has 7 million polys. Do we have more? No, let's divide this again. This isn't actually the production model. The production model actually wound up at 57 or 58 million polys, and then we decimated it out. But you can see how this is creating a layer, right? And then we come back in and we just think of this piece in layers. So, this is a layer. We're going to then cut back into a shape, and you can see this is sort of how I started roughing this out, right? Where you just get in, kick it up a little, and I have my finger on the Alt button. And so I'm doing this, I'm coming in, switching, bringing the shape around, right? And so this is how I'm developing my flow through this piece, right? And then, like I said, I'm just looking at these accidents that happen. And why I like to keep my brush moving, especially in situations like this, is you get, okay, well, we're going to do this, and we're going to come out with that. And now I'll come in with this clay fill and backfill one of these sides, right? And see how it's creating layers a little tighter here. And then I'll come in with twist, get it small, get it fairly high, and you can come in, whoa, what is that? Something's wrong with my brush. Shouldn't be acting that way. Okay, that's a little better, I guess. All right. Is there just like no... There's plenty of geometry there. That's weird. The setting on this is a little strange. I don't know what's up with that. It's being really aggressive. Yeah, okay, there. And so you just come in and just have it set too high. And and once again, like with the twist, I'm not drawing lines, I'm creating levels, right? So once I've twisted that, I'll come back in with the SK clay fill, and you still have that round edge that's going to read real nice, but you've created these lips, and you can see how these were created in that way. And so my hash marking really isn't necessarily about lines. What we're doing is we're creating a area for these were going to be silver, so I know that it's going to be liver sulfured, and so I'm creating areas for the make up your mind. Are you going to work? There we go. Creating areas for the sulfur to sit, and you can see they're really not about the lines. They're about creating these pieces, these parts to be important, because this is going to be polished off. And then this is, then this is going to be sulfured, so that's going to retain that dark a lot better, if that makes sense. And so you can see this has very little height travel, but we have a lot of depth information. Oh yeah, clients can be just a massive nightmare. It just doesn't stop. But it's like, as long as you're clear with them in the sense of, this is what your money's buying you, and there's no ambiguity. Don't be scared to tell them what you want, and that comes down to not being scared of losing a job or two, because like I said, if you're desperate in the sense of you have to have X amount of jobs to pay your rent and this and that, and it's like that's just where the client has all of the power, So this is a really great example of low relief and a lot of information. You can see this isn't done yet. And a lot of this chatter really is what's selling the piece at the end of the day. We're selling motion here, right? So you have this cacophonous wave, and then a lot of this subtle little bumping is going to get polished away, but you can see that you're going to be left with this nice just sort of patterning, and these are the things that show up in the liver sulfur. And like, you don't want to just do this, right? Because that's just a line, and it's boring, and your brain looks at it and it looks like a line. Where if you're doing something this organic, of course, if you're doing something architectural, the lines are needed. But even here, this, like I said, this isn't actually the final model, because in the final model, this line, and that's what I'm saying, like, you could see where I came in with a tool and just drew this line in. But in the final model, this cat attacked things. I was like, what is that noise? This became a step, and that step is going to polish dramatically better. So, when you have a change here, it's so much better to come in, grab this, drag it down, kind of punch it up under the surface a little, right? And now that line, of course, you have to then fix these lines. But that step is going to read, even if it's like half a mil, that step is going to read a lot stronger than just a drawn line. And it's something, it's a tricky thing to get your brain into registering that you really want to create in layered steps as opposed to graphic lines. Because once you come out of your part, you're just going to get a much nicer object off the printer, out of the metal. You just wind up with a much stronger product. Sorry, the bracelet was a cluster, guys, and I was like, blah. I could deal with it no more because I wanted to get into some of the detail stuff to show you some detailing techniques. I think this one does it pretty well. Let's go back over here. My process, if I'm creating, I do muddle around a lot, so it's not always the fastest process in the world. I could be like, once again, if I'm doing something where I know I need to do it, I could be very quick. But I like taking my time, looking at shapes, seeing how they work, seeing where they go. Yeah, it is. And what's really funny, it's facing the wrong way. I tried to explain that to Guy Harvey, but yeah, and what's really nice is now, that was put on with an alpha and then pulled back in, and now all of this we can do with the live Boolean stuff. No, it's so exciting what we can do now. They've really changed the program for really, really good benefits. Let's see if I can find something else that has nice subtle surfacing. I promise this week I'm going to flush my machine and get my drives in order so we can, like this was a knife for Ken Onion. He wanted to do a tank-inspired knife. We've got to close. Ken's awesome. He's a really good guy. So, once again, distinctive steps. We knew that these were going to get polished down quite a bit. You can see here, it's not about drawing the detail on. A lot of people just draw the arrow in. You really want that to become a polishing surface, right? Here, using texture to stand this is like the rear view light of a tank. We just took elements of tank and turned it into an assisted opening knife. But, it's funny, I'm not, like I said, this week I promise I'll go through stuff and be a wee bit more organized with all my quick saves. I can find better model references. Yeah, see, like portrait stuff. Always a joy. I'm not really seeing the piece I wanted you to see. Actually, this one's okay too. Yeah, it's always funny when you're culturally appropriating things such as, the hooks and the stuff, and, there are the stories and histories behind them, and it's very easy not to take into some real important considerations when you're using them. All right, so this is the traditional sugar skull, and this is decimated. that's the other thing. The decimation tools in this program are just staggering. That's a 200,000 or 300,000 poly decimation. And this is what I wanted to show you, the Fudo. Come on. Oh, it's not a separate tool there here. Yeah, there it is. Doop. Like this. Boom. So this is a Fudo on the inside of one of those rings. And you can see here, once again, it's so much more about creating nice, flat polishing surfaces. And you can see we did do, I do have graphic lines, because you got to think this thing's, this big. So we do want some of that linear detail, but if you'll notice, the linear detail is always tied. See how we have just these flat surfaces? That's going to polish bright. I inflated these beads. These beads are going to polish bright. And, you're going, oh, well, look at how tessellated that is. That's going to be, that big, man. So that's the other thing you want to do is, it's really easy to get in here. And once again, this has been decimated, but it's really easy to get in here. Or is this one? No. Oh, yeah, there's still not much poly here. It's easy to get in here and start being really, this little thing. You got to really remember the size you're working in. And so, this is on the inside of a ring, but look at how dimensional he is. I mean, we have a lot of depth in this guy. We have a frame. We have flames going around the frame. And I really wanted to make him, if you'll notice, he's sort of looking at you from this angle, because you're looking through the ring, right? So I wanted you to be able to make eye contact with him. And it's just silly little things like that that make their stories. Remember, jewelry is all about telling stories. And you can see how this is going to polish interestingly. And, once again, here, you look down into the ring, you have this really nice dynamic action going on. Linears, long linears that are going to wind up pointing to the object, keeping things flat, and then the complexity is lying behind flat surfaces that aren't going to get squished. These are all high because these are going to polish bright, And so how you compose things are important, And how you, of course, how you compose things. Captain Obvious here. Yeah, no, those were they were silver, and then they had enamel in the back. Yeah, it'd be nice too, but they did it with just a plain enamel and then in sterling. I think they might have made a gold one, I'm not sure. So you can see how you can, the linear detail, and when I say linear detail, I'm talking about this drawing detail, these things, right? It is important sometimes to come in and really separate this stuff, because, man, this is, where, hold on. Why? Boop. That's a millimeter. That's tiny. It's tiny, 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 tiny. And you can see this very clearly, where if this were just drawn on, you're not going to get any of that. You're not going to read any dynamicism. You're not going to get anything exciting or compelling off of it. It's going to be boring. And it's tricky because we're creating things that, you're looking up inside this thing. So how do you make it where looking into a ring, you still, here, hold on, let's show part. Right? You have this really cool story inside of your ring. And there's a little thing, and see there's DW in there. I always just hide weird things in places. Yeah, so this is a standard palette now, and I wonder One sec, let me see if I have this. And I'll show you. Come on. No, travel drive. Come on. You can do it. I've been on the road, so I have like different iterations of different things in different places, and I'm just like, what? Oh, there's Pirate Skull. Okay. Boop. And so it's sort of talking about sculpting something symmetrically, and then thank you. So you can see this was we were talking about making okay, that's Fudo. We were talking about doing some skull rings that are for a different project, and they're going to run with them, and blah. So these are pretty symmetrical. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to play with taking the base and then just really quick iterating them out into things that are a little less symmetrical. So you can see, symmetry, and now you can move it around, but that can become something interesting. This was not that interesting, but so started playing with that, and then we made our little tin thing, and then a little growly guy, and skull with bandana. I thought this said it had the pirate skull in it. Okay, nope, it doesn't. Let's 3D. Here, it might just be easier to do this. No. Import STL file. Go back down to Travel Drive. Oh, lazy stuff. Where was that again? New skulls. Pirate skull. Is it thinking? No. All right. And so here you can see we took that base skull ring, right? And I just spent a little extra time, made it non-symmetrical, sculpt on it some, broke it up to be a little rougher, and now we did sort of the little pirate skull. And this is for a project for a friend of mine who bought a pirate ship. Literally. Let's see. Oh, okay. So I think I just took this and smoothed it down, maybe. So this is a byproduct of that. And so you can see how very quickly, like with a base model, you could just iterate it out to something interesting. But even here, when we start playing with these cracks and lines, I like to try to get them to be steps. You really want that step stuff to be, a little bit. And what's nice is that on the Solidscape, a lot of the surface noise actually shows up. You can see that it's non-symmetrical in any way, shape, or form, and it becomes a visually interesting object. I think non-symmetry works well. A lot of my skull stuff is very symmetrical, the base skulls. It was just a really good foundation, and when I started doing them, I just needed to iterate a lot of there you go, One-Eyed Willie. Here, let's go back to this guy. In here, you can see how it's not just lines. We're trying to make them layers. And here's another, I filled it up. The bandana has no airspace in it, but I still came back in and just sort of drew the teeth in and hinted at these being there because that's a finished string, where 90% of the things you'll see, if it's something like this, you'll never see the backside, So I think it's important to continue to return to the insides of these things. And, even some of the most exquisite pieces of art, jewelry out there, you look on the inside and it's boring. There's nothing to it. Where all you had to do is come in and take, clay tubes, for example, and, just, and, on something like this, I'm not going to bother with my symmetry because I want that non-symmetrical thing. And you come in, you just do something like this, throw some grooves on the surface, and you can see it's not like I spent a ton of time in here. But that is now a skull wearing a bandana, right? And I think little things like that are what people will pick the object up, look at it, and go, oh, that's rad. And, those little stories that they could tell themselves, that's why I like surprising stuff on the inside, because that's their own little story. And, they could share it with you or they don't. And I think that's a lot of the psychology of the jewelry stuff. Yeah, what time is it? How are we doing here? Okay, it's 11. I went 3 hours? All right. Okay, guys, I think that's that. Sorry the bracelet turned out to be goon, but I think you can sort of see what I mean, though, in the concept of stepping. Sorry, I'm keeping you up for not a lot of excitement there. So, yeah. Are there any questions or anything I can answer before we close down? I think I have a 2-hour slot that I sort of went over, but luckily there's no one behind me, so. Good morning. I know. I miss the UK right now, but we're in beautiful Seattle weather at the moment, so I can't complain about things. It's nice. Cool. And like I said, next time I'll have my machine flushed and I'll have my drive sorted out, and I think November is the plan. I might wind up in Spain in November. Who knows? I have no idea. They're like, oh, Tomas, we rented a house. I'm like, okay, wherever it is, I'll go. So, yeah. All right, guys. It was great to see you. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that this is the time slot for a little bit, and it's every other week for now. So not next week, but the week after I should be back, as far as I know, as long as... Thank you very much. Yeah. And I don't know if you guys are on my Facebook jewelry stuff, but you can, if you want, I'll take suggestions if someone really wants to see something. I can target the stream for that. Right now I'm still just trying to get in tune with streaming. Like I said, I don't necessarily usually work a 2-hour stint, so I'm still trying to calibrate what I can get done in the 2-hour thing. My classes, for God's sakes, run 5 hours. It's ridiculous. On the classes you're going to be making, well, I'm still doing the classes through ZBrush workshops, or now it's jewelrytech.co, but it's hold on, let me see if I can. Boop. This is. Oh. Hold on. I think I don't know if I'm still broadcasting. I didn't open a new tab. Oh man, this is me. Welcome to it. Am I still alive? No, I blew it, didn't I? Oh man. Hold on. Oh god, I'm such a ding dong, guys. I can't tell if I'm still broadcasting or not, because I went away from I tried to go to my Facebook page. All right, let's see. Are we still here? Oh no, that's the wrong thing. Twitch. Am I still alive? Okay, it says welcome to the chat room, so I'm assuming I'm still live? Good God, I am a ding dong, sorry. All right, copy. Paste. That's the jewelry group, and I normally post there. And if there are any, if you
want to build the computer yourself, you can go to NCX, CyberPower, iBuyPower, AVA Direct, a whole list of other ones as well.
Oops.
There's quite a few
Hold on.
PC
I think we're going to an ad. I'm assuming I'm live. I'm sorry, guys. Like I said, I'm still trying to figure this out. So that's the jewelry group that I run, and it's a lot of jewelry professionals and that. So you can always ask questions there, and if there are like questions that are sorted out, I can then I can bring those over and do the live streaming with that. That was really a bad sentence. Sorry. Sorry, I got flustered when I lost myself. I didn't know if I was projecting or not. Oh God. All right. I'm a mess. Okay. Can someone tell me, can you hear me? Am I still broadcasting? Because I'm not seeing myself on Twitch. Oh, okay, good. Like I said, I'm sorry. I'm looking at my thing and I have an advertisement. I'm not as okay. Holy cannoli. All right, so I don't have to type that in. Holy cow. I went to get my Facebook address and I just totally went off of the Twitch page, so I couldn't tell if I was still in there or not. Oh my God, how ridiculous. Okay, so yeah, if you can post post questions in there, and as I said, I'm going to flush my machine and get all my drives consolidated. I've just been busy. I haven't had time to do it. Get my drives consolidated, and then I'm now sort of seeing what I can get done in 2 hours. So I'll try to be a little bit more, yeah, you know what I mean. All right, guys. And gals, I really appreciate your time, and I hope that you gained something out of it. I think we all learned that I don't know how to use Twitch very well. Okay, let's see, where's this program? There we go. All right, I appreciate it. Have a great evening.